Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Nightlight Spring Speaker Series. My name is Delia Gallegos. I am Acyuta's assistant, and I am filling in for him, hosting these talks while he is currently on a trip. Today, we have Renn Butler, whom I will be introducing in just a moment. And just so you know, you can find all of his contact information here. And then tomorrow, we're going to have Jen Zart coming on to talk about astrology rocks. So the relationship between astrology and gemstones. If you haven't registered for that yet, please be sure to register here. And today, we are very excited to have Renn Butler on. If you are in any of Acyuta's programs, you will have heard Acyuta recommend several times his wonderful book, The Archetypal Universe, as a resource for students. We're always asking, how can I learn more about how to combine the planetary archetypes? And that's a fantastic reference. Okay, and without further ado, let me hand it over to the person we're all here for. Renn, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Delia. You can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for your warm welcome. I want to thank Acyuta for this fun opportunity, and also for his many kind and generous comments about my book over the years. I really appreciate it. There's some interesting transits happening in the sky, so we'll start by looking at some of those. And you mentioned that the chat is turned off to the general public, so I'm the only one that can see the trolling comments. So that's okay. I changed the name to Astrology, the Rosetta Stone of the Psyche, because I believe that the illumination of what's happening inside us, in our unconscious, the relationship between our conscious and our unconscious parts of our psyche, is the most important feature of astrology. And I think that all schools of astrology are probably, or most, moving toward that direction. We're moving toward what Grof might call a holotropic worldview, moving toward wholeness. That's what the name holotropic means. Other people might call it a psychedelic worldview, a psychedelic renaissance. And I believe that self-exploration, self-knowledge, the inner archaeological quest to uncover our unconscious material and delve deeply into the personal and collective unconscious is the way forward to help us get ahead of the wave of very urgent problems that we are facing in our world right now. Climate change, nuclear proliferation, pollution, and others. Okay, just a little background on me. I was raised Mormon. This is me on the right. The oldest son of a Mormon family is no joke. Quite a good shot of Saturn there in my early life. Here I am on the left with the Eddie Munster haircut. This is about 1965. Then my parents left the Mormon church and started a Back to the Land commune in 1970. And here I am with my three siblings. And you can see quite a different atmosphere here. The Uranus-Pluto conjunction of the 60s and early 70s was this powerful wave that kind of propelled my parents out of the church and toward the human potential movement. And here's about 1977. So you're familiar with this book, many of you. This is the first one I wrote. There are many interesting case studies here of psychedelic session reports, which I correlate with the journeyers' astrological transits. This is based on the work of Richard Tarnas and Stan Grof. So just a little bit about the world transits right now at the outset. Perhaps the most powerful aspect happening is the Saturn square Uranus. It's hard to see it here because of, I guess, the northern latitude that I'm in Victoria. It doesn't look like a square, but it is from Aquarius to Taurus, of course, 9 degrees. We use 10-degree orbs on squares in archetypal astrology. There's a lot of tension the fracturing, the culture wars are happening now with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There's even more polarization happening in the world. The essence of this, I would say, is that fear is being activated. Uranus liberates and emancipates whatever it touches. And Saturn represents, among other things, fear. Fear of death. That's the root of all fear. Normally, Saturn has two sort of negative components to it. There are many positive components as well. On one hand, Saturn represents fear, but in most of our lives, we also repress that fear. So it's not only the original trauma that's sitting in our unconscious, a lot of which is from actual life-threatening events in our past, such as birth trauma. There's that fear sitting in the unconscious, but we also repress that. It's too abysmal. It's too threatening to our egos that, we're trying to kind of keep a lid on things, keep us afloat. So we repress that. And that repressive act is also Saturnian. So both the fear and the repression of the fear. But when Uranus lines up with Saturn, Uranus liberates and awakens and emancipates what it touches. So people are feeling their deep anxiety, their fear, their dread. And I believe that this is a very common denominator in what's happening in many people's psyches right now. The sort of mainstream and then conspiracy theories, what's happening in Russia, what's happening in Ukraine. It's interesting that Saturn-Uranus can also correspond to like anti-democratic revolutions. And I would say that Trumpism in many of its features, especially around the election where, the insurrection on January 6th represented an attempt to take over the government and not allow the peaceful transfer of power, to accept the legitimate results of the free and fair election. So Uranus creates this urge in people to rebel against whatever they think is oppressive or is a problem. And in this case, it's with a Saturnian quality of stopping democracy. I think that we can see this also in the behavior of Putin. From the Western point of view, the war in Ukraine, and our hearts go out to the suffering of the people in Ukraine right now, can be seen as a David and Goliath, like David, Uranus, the rebel, fighting against the oppressive Goliath represented by Putin and his army. Of course, from the Russian side, or from the sort of mainstream narrative in Russia, it's a battle between, great mother Russia, the third Rome that must not fall is part of their mythos, against the Germanic hordes, the European, the secular, the sort of godless hordes from the West coming toward them. So that's how they perceive it. Finally, it's interesting that there was Saturn and Uranus were in a square in 1917 during the Bolshevik Revolution. And Rick Tarnas talked about this as a kind of an anti-revolutionary revolution. Like the day after the revolution, then it becomes an oppressive totalitarian state, barbed wire to keep the people inside their Marxist utopia. Putin's trying to recreate that in some ways, and this goes back to the long history of Russia with the very violent behavior of the ruling classes toward this massive empire of like 8 or 10 time zones, I can't remember, to kind of hold it together. There's a lot of fear inside those rulers that are trying to control things that way. So that's just a little bit of background. I want to look a bit at Putin's chart as well, halfway through this talk, and some of his transits. So I hope you found that interesting. Now, the Saturn Uranus is quite strong right now. It's being punctuated by Venus and Mars here, this triple conjunction, all in square with Uranus. I was at a social gathering the other day, and I noticed that people were kind of hitting each other like friendly whacks, like, you know, how males tend to do it more, like slaps on the back or little friendly whacks or taps. And I was thinking, boy, that really fits the Venus, Mars, Saturn, you know, the friendly, but sort of a bit of a martial energy. And then Saturn is like boundary collisions. And on CNN yesterday, I noticed US President Biden, he was with the 82nd Airborne Division in Poland, visiting some soldiers, and he whacked this soldier pretty hard on the shoulder or the back. And I was thinking, wow, that really is an archetype that's happening right now. Some of you may have noticed that in, you know, yourself or the people around you. It can also have a bit more of a vicious side. The Mars Saturn could be kind of harsh or acrimonious, kind of conflicts with friends or loved ones. We also, of course, are also in this amazing Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which is being punctuated right now by Mercury. The sun is still barely an orb of Jupiter. It's definitely an orb of the Neptune. Unusually meaningful. It's like an outpouring of meaning and sense of connection, re-enchantment, like a divine spring, irrepressibly infusing new life, new meaning, new sense of connection into the world psyche. Here's one of my favorite pictures of Rick Tarnas from the early 90s. And Stan Grof, this is probably from about 10 years ago, or 5 to 10 years ago. So Grof and Tarnas met at the Esalen Institute in the early 70s. And one of the things that they talked about was Grof's problem, and also his colleagues' problem, to try to predict the content of people's sessions in high-dose psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. So Grof and his colleagues had tried for years to find a diagnostic system that could predict the kinds of emotions, energies, the layer of the unconscious likely to surface in an upcoming psychedelic session, with no luck. When they finally discovered archetypal astrology, or the astrology that focuses primarily on aspects and transits between the luminaries and planets, that's the basic definition of archetypal astrology, they were quite astounded. The fact that it was something that was even further beyond the pale of the mainstream than psychedelic therapy was quite an irony to Grof. But he eventually came to feel that astrology is a Rosetta stone of the psyche. It's the only system that can successfully predict both the content and timing of experiences encountered in non-ordinary states of consciousness in experiential psychotherapy. And he also said famously that psychedelics, when used responsibly, the key word there, can play a similar role in psychology and psychotherapy as the microscope in biology and the telescope in astronomy. So just a couple little basics about the approach that Tarnas initiated. Of course, there were powerful influences on him. He didn't, create this out of the blue, of course. Non-fatalistic and non-deterministic. Archetypes can manifest in a wide range of possible expressions while still being true to their basic thematic character. Rick calls this multivalence. Archetypes can manifest in many different levels of our lives, like internally or relationally, or in our perception of the world situation. For example, through our dreams, our psychedelic sessions, the different levels. They can also take various forms, multivalence, or different meanings, that we can predict the basic thematic character of an upcoming period, but in general, we cannot predict the specific concrete outcomes that astrology's function is not to predict exactly what's going to happen, but to illuminate the meaning behind events, not what is going to happen, but what is the meaning of events? How does what happen in our lives relate to our psyches, to our emotional process, our quest to heal ourselves? There's always a interrelationship between the inner and the outer world. And so this is also connected with the psychological school of astrology, Jungian schools of astrology, such as Liz Green. There are always additional factors at play in the way that archetypes will manifest in the physical world, such as cultural context, what kind of society we live in, our free will, co-creative participation in the archetypes that are coming through us. Our relationship with our unconscious is so very important. The things that are inside us that we're not aware of, that are buried within us, that are repressed, have more influence over the outcome of our lives than what's in our conscious mind. They tend to sabotage us from the inside. There are also positive things in the unconscious that help us, but the negative things tend to affect how we selectively perceive the world around us, the things that we actively create, and the things that we seem to attract toward us. So those three major ways that unconscious material can affect our life experience. So it's very important to do the inner archaeological quest so that we're not being sabotaged from the inside by this unconscious material. And I've added into Rick's sort of list here, the universal mind's desire for variety of experience. So he said famously, astrology is archetypally predictive rather than concretely predictive. We now have computers and access to huge databases of accurate data. So we can now test some of the hypotheses that are put forward. And it is very rare to find kind of concretely verifiable correlations, between astrological alignments and manifestations in the outer world. Okay, so a little bit about non-ordinary states. Grof prefers the term holotropic, moving toward wholeness. So since the dawn of history, guided non-ordinary, or holotropic states of consciousness have played a central role in the spiritual and ritual life of humanity. Stretching back more than 30,000 years, the shamans of ancient cultures began their healing professions through a spontaneous or induced experience of death and rebirth. In a firsthand way, they explored territories of the psyche that transcend the boundaries of normal individual awareness. Similarly, in the rites of passage, initiates were guided into non-ordinary states and had a personal experience of higher realms that transcend the physical world. In the ancient mystery religions of the Mediterranean, neophytes participated in various mind-expanding processes in order to transcend the limits of individual awareness and experience directly the sacred or numinous dimensions of reality. The celebrated mother goddess mysteries of Eleusis in Greece, which were held near Athens for almost 2,000 years, we are now virtually certain used ergot, a naturally occurring form of LSD. This is the goddess Demeter, who became the Roman Ceres, and the root of our word cereal, the goddess of cereal. She's the Mother Earth goddess, and the ergot grows on grain, on rye. So many of the creative and intellectual giants of Western culture attest in their writing to the life-changing power of their experiences at Eleusis or one of the other mystery sites. As well as the ritual use of psychedelic substances, many cultures have used methods such as trance dancing, drumming, sensory overload and sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, breathing maneuvers, fasting, meditation, and other techniques to enter holotropic states. These all have the same effect. They weaken the power of the ego, the control of the ego, and allow the unconscious material to come forth, some of which is personal. And then if you go even deeper, then it becomes like the superconscious or the transpersonal realms of the universal consciousness. I give that introduction just to create a context for what we're now going to talk about. All pre-industrial and non-Western cultures have had ways for people to enter into these non-ordinary or holotropic states. They were a central part of their ritual and artistic and social lives. And we're the first culture to try to pave over the psyche and to kind of build a better world on top of that concrete floor. And, we've been very successful in manipulating nature and, increasing food supplies and modern medicine and dentistry and many other benefits. And we can maintain those, but we need now to turn back toward the subjective side of our psyches to reclaim the interiority of our beings, our emotions that are causing so much trouble in the modern world. So the irrational behaviors, especially greed and aggression, the two main negative emotions in human life. Grof found he conducted over 3,000 high-dose LSD sessions with in a program with voluntary patients, and was able to extrapolate out of this vast amount of observations what he calls an expanded cartography of the human psyche. So in the early stages of self-exploration, people can relive anything from infancy to the present. He calls this the biographical layer of the psyche. And these are the psychotraumas that most of you would be familiar with, that you would get quite a bit of support for if you were dealing with these with a psychodynamic therapist. Physical and sexual abuse, a hostile family atmosphere, sibling rivalry, severe toilet training. But there was another category of trauma that has not yet been integrated in any major psychological school. And Grof observed leftover traces from serious illnesses, operations, or accidents. Especially the most serious were those that involved a threat to life, a threat to breathing, like diphtheria, whooping cough, or near drowning, or attempted strangulation. Things like that can leave a very serious leftovers in the psyche, but they can be completely processed out and resolved. There can also be unmet needs for human contact. The problems of omission, he calls that, something that should have happened, didn't happen. And people can receive that through appropriate, non-sexual contact with their therapists or sitters while they're in a deeply regressed state. People can also have these positive memories that can emerge as well. When self-exploration continues, people begin to have very powerful, energetic, and emotional experiences related to birth and the confrontation with mortality and death. And he used the term perinatal in this context to describe this layer of the psyche. Perinatal means surrounding the birth, but it's birth and death. And also our soul's quest to reach rebirth and transcendence. And I'll go through these, but just here's an overview. Rick Tarnas was able to see that these four basic stages of the birth process, or the sort of the womb state, the early stage of labor with the cervix closed, no exit, constriction and contraction, the driving dynamic stage of labor with the cervix now open, and then the crowning and completed birth are connected with very deep and meaningful ways the meanings of these four outer planets. This is sort of no boundaries, unitive state, Neptune, the constricting, oppressive state, no exit with Saturn, the driving, powerful forces, dynamic stage of labor with Pluto, and then the ecstatic rebirth, the escape from the life-threatening birth canal, and sort of the victorious completed birth with Uranus. Let us look more deeply at the perinatal layer. So the most important qualities are blissful oceanic feelings. It's a flowing type of consciousness, sense of no boundaries, feelings of cosmic unity, and perception of higher meaning. The fetus in a good womb situation, its consciousness is still all spread through the creation, through the cosmos. It is not really sort of limited to the boundaries of its body. Its consciousness is all over the place. It's a very free, floating, blissful kind of state. And, we know that Neptune is correlated with spiritual feeling, mystical feelings, loss of boundaries, and so on. So this is one of Grof's paintings, The Amniotic Universe. It's from an LSD session. He identified with the fetus in a state of blissful union with the entire cosmos. Through symbolic logic, images of space or of the ocean share with the intrauterine state the quality of no boundaries. There's no boundaries in the ocean or in space. And so our psyches pick imagery that fits the emotional or sensory quality of what we're experiencing. And so these perinatal experiences are very multi-layered. There's not only an obstetric component, but it can open out into scenes from nature that share that same quality, or past lives, or ancestral, racial, or collective memories, and so on. Or archetypes, mythological sequences. This is connected with heaven or paradise. So here's oceanic feelings. There can also be disturbances of intrauterine life, or what he calls toxic womb experiences. If the mother's using drugs or alcohol, or is not being supported, it has ambivalent feelings toward the pregnancy, or has various medical problems, then all of that registers in a very deep way in the body and psyche of the fetus. It can be a sense of being poisoned, experimented on by demonic archetypes, feelings of bad karma. Sometimes can emerge. You feel like you're surrounded in it. It's like it is feeding into the biological situation around you. But Stan was able to prove that there's a finite amount of negative material in the individual psyche. So it is very beneficial to face this in sessions. If we just lie back and endure the experience, have it fully, that releases and consumes it from our system. Very beneficial. So this is from a holotropic breathwork session in the lap of the goddess by Sylvina Heath during a transit of Neptune conjuncture natal moon. So she's lying in the moon, the mother goddess, and Neptune is the sort of oceanic feeling of connection, of higher meaning. This is from another breathwork session, Kundalini Mother, by an Italian artist who sadly passed away since then, during a world transit of Uranus conjunct Neptune. Uranus adds that kind of sparkling, bright, vital quality to this mystical state. My colleague Olena Provencher drew this Jupiter Neptune, the womb with a view. my own words. And this is one of the most beautiful transits that's happening in the sky right now, this sense of oceanic connection, of no boundaries, of higher meaning. I mean, democracy has been revitalized around the world when you realize the kind of police state that Putin has been working on, but is now taking a stronger quantum leap toward developing. It really makes you appreciate the freedoms and democracy that you have in your own country. And though it's not perfect, obviously, democracy is only as good as the heart and minds of the people who vote. So there's room for improvement there, but it's a better problem to have. You know, he began with the myth of the sort of enlightened autocrat, but that has now been completely exploded, and it's just another dictator. You know, that's how I see it, and that's how many people see it, but not everybody. Some people see him as the liberating force. So we have to respect people's emotions, if not their interpretation of those emotions always. So the womb with the view, the expansive sense of Neptune, the grand vision, the grand feeling of connection. So feelings of oceanic or melted ecstasy, Grof's terms, are a powerful healing threshold in psychotherapy. The goal of effective psychotherapy is to open or widen the pathway to divine consciousness. This is Grof's words. That we work through the traumas as our inner healer presents them in our sessions. We can't choose what comes up for us. We just have to surrender and allow what's ever in there to come forth. But gradually, the negative material gets worked through and released, and that opens or widens the pathway to these unitive states. And this is a very important threshold. So just a very salient example, the music of Enya. This Orinoco flow was just mind-blowing when this came out in 1988. She had a highly empowered Neptune with Pluto, transiting Pluto conjunct her natal Neptune. It was also, of course, in the early years of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, the great Uranus-Neptune conjunction of late 80s and 90s. And she was, of course, also born with Jupiter square Neptune, this lush, rich, abundant, enchanted, sort of luxurious quality that she has in her imagination here. Oceanic abundance and flowing grace. Okay, basic perinatal matrix 2, or BPM 2. The most important qualities are a sense of no exit, feelings of compression, constriction, and hopelessness, lack of meaning or connection. And we know that Saturn has many positive qualities, but the negative qualities really fit this stage of labor, this kind of archetypal state. This boundaries, constriction, selective perception of everything that is negative in our lives and in the world. So the beginning of BPM2, the onset in a high dose LSD session, this is another one of Grof's paintings. He had transiting Saturn opposition his sun, and there can be a sense of being engulfed in a whirlpool or maelstrom, onset of labor and the beginning of mortality. Our consciousness begins to be identified with the boundaries of our body, and that's from the compressing, contracting forces of the uterine walls, where the other is kind of a hostile force at that point. There's no exit. And then that's the beginning of mortality, because now we are identified with this organism, this fetus. And then that puts us on a one-way trajectory toward eventual death. We are mortal. So that's why that image is there. There can be images of the loss of heaven or paradise. The incipient uterine contractions can be depicted as an attack by a monstrous octopus or a tarantula, or engulfment inside of a whale. There can be images of hells from various cultures. We can identify with the terrible suffering of various human groups, such as Jews in the concentration camps, Africans in the slave trade, First Nations people dying of genocide or smallpox, or Arabs massacred by the Mongols, and many other groups of suffering throughout history. This is a holotropic breathwork session again. He identified with an old woman wandering in a landscape of eternal pain and loneliness, and he had transiting Saturn square his natal sun. Just an example from art, Francisco de Goya's Saturn devouring his sun. This is very much a BPM2 image, very explicitly connected with Saturn. Chronos, the Greek word for Saturn, our word for basis for chronometer. This is an image about the mortality, that in the end, time devours all things. That's what that myth depicts. So the understanding of the perinatal matrices opens up some additional dimensions in our understanding of archetypes. So Venus-Saturn transits, you can now add to your understandings, can evoke memories from this no exit stage of labor, the sort of encagement, entrapment. This is a very important source of clinical depression, Grof found, this stage of birth. In this case, inflected by Venus. So in very strong Saturn to Venus transits, at certain points in our lives, we could have anguish, unbearable, demoralizing feelings about our attractiveness, our lovability, we could feel separate and cut off from people. So this helps. It can help us, and it can help us in our counseling with our clients to be sympathetic with them and to kind of help them to see what's trying to happen. A transit like this, it wants us to feel those emotions. Whatever's coming up is the right experience for us to have. We need to learn to open to our feelings and feel them more. And then in breathwork sessions or psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy sessions, we're basically just putting aside a day when we're saying to the gods and goddesses, I can feel even more. Go ahead. I want to feel even more of what's happening inside me. And during Saturn Venus transits, like what's happening in the sky right now, where we could feel some of these kinds of emotions about our lovability and so on. Mars Saturn, our sense of passion, energy, drive can feel constricted, blocked, delayed, and there can be a feeling of resulting frustration, resentment, bitterness, kind of acrimony. Just a random slide here. Oops. So yeah, I think you can see that. Darling, did you see that amazing new soul rectification program? And then he says, as it turns out, I may not be from the Pleiades after all. Bob, we need to talk. Relationship complications in the astrology of the future. I commissioned her to draw this, a kind of a Venus-Saturn cartoon. Just gonna, I would like to take a 1-minute break at this point. Okay, so if anyone needs to run to the bathroom, go ahead, and I shall see you back here in just a moment. Okay, we're still recording, right?
Yes, we are.
Alrighty. Okay, here are the transits for today again. Oops. And this is Vladimir Putin's chart in the center with the world transits around it. You've no doubt seen this. This is called a bi-wheel chart. Just a couple things about Putin's chart before we finish the perinatal matrices. I think that the most interesting sort of indicative aspect in his chart is this Saturn-Neptune conjunction here. The Sun, Saturn, Neptune, Mercury conjunction. So highly activated Saturn, Neptune. We remember what we just looked at. Neptune represents states of unity, of wholeness, of no boundaries, of peace and security, the good womb. Well, Saturn is this sort of apocalyptic sense of loss, of being cast out of Eden, of constriction, of danger and threat. That's BPM2 rather. Saturn has positive sides as well, but that is what BPM2 feels like. And he was born in 52, I think. I can't see it up there. Then during this powerful Saturn-Neptune conjunction of the early 50s. And this is the dominant myth in his life, is that the Soviet Union, or mythos, the Soviet Union was this great empire when the glory days, there was security and, serenity and peace. And then they lost it. And he's often said that, the fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century and so on. There's a sense of having had something precious and having lost it. That's one of the features of Saturn, Neptune in its early stages, in its unintegrated, unresolved forms. If people do spiritual work, they can regain that Neptunian womb. But I don't believe he's doing that work. He's a man who's living only in the geopolitical world, or primarily. And I believe he's projecting some of this onto the world situation and his desire to sort of retake some of the former Soviet republics and to sort of shore up the boundaries against the threat from the outside, the Germanic or Gallic invaders from the West, as I said, the atheist sort of hordes of Western liberal democracy. So I think that's quite a representative aspect. We could see the kind of paranoia, the sneaky quality of the Neptune that sort of fits the spy mentality, the Mercury Neptune, his use of poison, to poison his political opponents, though he had at least one shot to death in front of the Kremlin. The Mars trine Pluto is kind of correlated with the macho man image, the he-man, the rugged outdoorsman, really fits that. Jupiter square Pluto really fits the sense of empowerment, stature, the king, the archetype of the king or queen is connected with Jupiter Pluto. The power, the autocrat, also superiority complex is the shadow side of Jupiter Pluto. And then he has a Venus Jupiter opposition, which I think is one of the reasons why he's popular among some Russians, especially rural, poor, and uneducated Russians, just like Trump. Basically the same sort of breakdown there. There's some exceptions, of course, but that's the general sort of breakdown. He has a kind of smarmy charm, the Venus Jupiter, when you see him kind of sauntering up through the Politburo and everybody's standing up clapping, and he's kind of saunters in. He has this kind of folksy charm, like the cool guy has arrived, the party has arrived, you know. Venus opposition Jupiter. So I found those interesting. He has other aspects as well, but those are the most important ones. Now his transits. Transiting Saturn opposition his Pluto. This can really evoke a tough, brutal, tenacious side of people. Like a Terminator archetype, ruthless feelings. Somebody described, William Cohen on CNN yesterday described him as an arsonist. This can really be like Pluto is implacable force meeting Saturn, unmovable resistance, and then in this sort of pressure cooker, things just get destroyed. Think about World War I, which started under Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and the sort of the stalemate with the trench warfare and the massive loss of life, kind of no man's land where things are just chewed up. So I'm concerned about that. I'm worried that he might just go for it. But you know, we can only hope that his better angels will win, or the angels and the people around him will get through to him, and he'll realize that he's made a terrible mistake and he should pull back. Maybe the eastern provinces should be allowed to join Russia if they want. I think that many Ukrainians would probably agree that that would be worth it to get Russia off their back. That's up to them to decide, but perhaps each of those disputed regions in the Donbass and so on could have their own referendums. That's just my 2 bits. Transiting Saturn is squaring his natal Jupiter. That can correspond sometimes to setbacks. You know, like Jupiter is the big plans, the big expansive dream, and then Saturn is the reality principle, the rude awakening. He also has Neptune square his Mars transit. These are 4-year transits. We use a 5-degree applying orb and a 5-degree separating orb on most transits in archetypal astrology. So he's definitely within that. That is a terrible transit for a military campaign. It can correspond to the quagmire situation, being kind of like mud, not getting traction, demoralizing, lack of ability to move forward or to have an effective point. And morale among the Russian troops is apparently extremely low, with desertions and so on. They don't want to kill their brothers and sisters and cousins, their family members. It's and sort of obfuscation about it. They weren't told, you know, what was happening and so on. So that is not going to help, you know, in, you know, Putin's sort of drive to sort of have a quick victory. Jupiter's moving up now to begin to square his Mars. That is going to begin about April 2nd. And I'm a little concerned about that one. That could add some extra kind of patriotic, righteous fervor, militancy to Putin's psyche. He could decide to escalate things under transit like that, or not. It could also fit like a negotiated peace, kind of a, you know, peace with honor kind of thing, a compromise. So let's hope that side of Jupiter will win, as opposed to the grandiose side, or the sort of taking things up to a higher level of violence. That would be Jupiter Mars as well. And then finally, he's got transiting Uranus conjunct, let's see, his natal Jupiter. So this came within the 5-degree orb last summer. And so even though it moved retrograde, the Uranus, the transit is still activated once it begins. It doesn't just end when the retrograde moves out of orb. It's stronger, of course, when it's when it's actually closer to the exact alignment. But it's been happening since the summer, and it'll be coming back in a month or two within the 5-degree orb. So Uranus Jupiter can correspond to Midas touch inflation, feeling of being beyond all boundaries, a feeling of luck, but also impulsive excess, massive overconfidence. And many observers are saying that the Russians were greatly over optimistic, or Putin was, about what might happen here. There's no way that he can dominate the entire country of Ukraine. He could destroy all the buildings, worst case scenario. But the Ukrainians will hate him more, and they won't give in, and they'll keep fighting, I believe. So there's no way that he can win, but they might be able to take those Russian-speaking provinces on the eastern side. Uranus conjunct Jupiter, the positive side, could be like a breakthrough. And I don't believe a military breakthrough is possible, but maybe a breakthrough in consciousness where he sees, okay, so that won't work. So let's just focus on what is possible and try to find a resolution to this situation. There could be an unexpectedly positive resolution, but that's the best case scenario. And with this Saturn Pluto terminator energy happening, I am 2/5 optimistic, I guess, at this point. That's just me, but it's not based on sort of astrological insights. Well, I hope that you found that interesting. So now let us continue with these perinatal matrices. So BPM3, the death rebirth struggle. So confrontations with the shadow side of human nature. There's an activation of tremendous aggressive energies in this stage of labor, driving forces, a sense of there being a finite amount of suffering. The cervix is now open, and there's a sense that you're slowly being pressed through this dark place toward some future freedom, light at the end of the tunnel. So there are a relatively standard mixture of themes. Everyone that Grof worked with that got to this layer of the unconscious experienced these themes. So the first one is a sense of titanic fight and activation of aggression. People in sessions could be thrashing around, like complex twisting movements. There could be explosive discharges of aggression. Very, very healing to get that energy out of our systems. There can be sexual feelings. These are caused by the suffocation in labor. The oxygen, which feeds the fetus, comes through a vein, which goes into the fetus heart, and then that is fed by arteries that are wound through the uterine walls. And in every uterine contraction, that cuts or diminishes the flow of oxygen and blood to the fetus, and that's experienced as suffocation. People can spend hours in high-dose psychedelic sessions gasping for breath, and like all this aggressive energy coming out around that. The aggression is a response to the life-threatening situation. The biological energies desire to survive or to fight back get activated, but the fetus can't scream, it can't fight back, can't leave, and so those energies are jammed back into its system. We also introject into our psyches the contracting forces of the mother's body. These become the basis of judging and punishing attitudes, like we identify with the perpetrating force in society, that the one who's doing the choking or doing the compressing. And that is especially connected with like Mars-Saturn aspects, that punishing energy. And we notice that that's happening in the sky right now. So the sexual component is caused by the suffocation. We know this correlation from autoerotic asphyxiation, for example. There's a connection between choking and sexual arousal. This is a very telling image from S&M, why people would want to sort of cover their face like that. And it really seems like a replay of birth, an attempt to kind of process those leftover energies. The problem of evil and the relationship between good and evil can emerge. Archetypal energies are what the Buddhists call wrathful deities, and Stan calls these themes the demonic. So the artist H.R. Giger was born with Pluto square Mars Saturn, and he had an uncanny ability to depict the nightmarish world of BPM 2 and BPM 3, connected with Saturn and with Pluto. And these are the kind of images people see in psychedelic therapy sessions when perinatal material is emerging. People can have tremendous feelings of nausea and projectile vomiting. There's a finite amount of that, so very beneficial to go through that. He calls this the scatological. Finally, journeyers have a sense of passing through purifying fire. And Grof coined the term pyrocatharsis for this. The fire has magical qualities, purifying everything that is rotten and corrupt in people's souls and preparing them for rebirth. This is from an ayahuasca session of a female participant with transiting Pluto conjunct her Sun and Sun opposition Pluto. So volcanic or Dionysian type of ecstasy is connected with BPM 3 and with Pluto. Rick Tarnas made the correlation between Pluto and this perinatal matrix. Erupting volcanoes, very common image when people are reliving the dynamic stage of labor. Blasting rockets. Very interesting video, Bad Romance. Lady Gaga had transiting Pluto conjunct her natal Mars and square her natal Sun. Sun in Aries square Mars in Capricorn, being lit up by that powerful Pluto transit. And during the world transit of Uranus square Pluto, of course, and this video depicts all those major BPM 3 themes that I just talked about: birth, death, aggression, sadomasochism, evil, the scatological element, that final scene in the bed where the sort of the remains of that guy, very kind of tawdry atmosphere. And then pyrocatharsis. It was almost like a perfect depiction of Stan's matrix there. And then Picasso's Guernica, he had transiting Pluto square his natal Sun. So very identical, I think, to what Lady Gaga had. Yes, Pluto square Sun. When he drew this about the German Luftwaffe bombing of Guernica in Spain. So Mercury Pluto. So with Mercury Pluto, our thinking can be obsessed and compelled by Pluto. We can be mentally interested in these shadow themes in criminology and the underworld of the psyche, depth psychology. Mercury also provides a verbal channel for us to express those repressed energies out of our system through, yelling, screaming, profanity, in, animal sounds, inhuman sounds, and things like that. Ideally, when we do psychotherapy, that we are supported in going wherever our inner healer wants us to go and being able to make sounds and movements. And Mars Pluto can really accentuate the aggressive, savage, primal, raw feelings of basic perinatal matrix 3. Now, BPM 4, suffering intensifies, and then there's an explosive liberation and a feeling of ecstatic rebirth as the infant exits the life-threatening birth canal. The profound sense of decompression, opening, and awakening. Ecstatic feelings of rebirth, renewal, redemption, forgiveness. Feelings of planetary citizenship and universal brotherhood, sisterhood. When you reach these states, you have tremendous compassion for the suffering of others when you realize that they're still being influenced by these negative perinatal matrices, BPM2 and BPM3. And you realize that people are basically good, that the generic state of the human psyche is loving, is kind. It wants to have meaningful work and to work with others to solve shared problems. It's inclusive, but that the wounding, the traumas in people, like these arrows jammed into people's psyches, bring out negative behaviors or sometimes even monstrous behaviors. And until those arrows are pulled out through the healing process, they can act like that. But Grof's work is very optimistic because he found that people can heal, very deep physical and emotional problems and come to a state of, more happiness, more peace, more meaningful sense of connection with the world around them. So it can be angelic choirs moving toward divine light. Images of peacock feathers are connected with rebirth. Brilliant spectra patterns. The inside of giant halls and cathedrals, which depict the opening and decompression of space as you exit the birth canal. The end of wars or revolutions. These are images that can flood through your psyche, the happy ending of a difficult situation. It's the fall of the Berlin Wall. For the nerdy KGB officers, this was not a happy moment, but for most of the world it was. Being held in the arms of the great mother goddess. We can identify with the death and rebirth of deities such as Osiris or Dionysus, Persephone, or Christ. And this is relatively independent of our beliefs or culture of origin. Even hardcore skeptics, atheists or Marxists can have these kind of images. And that definitely changes their worldview, Grof observed. We can reconnect with the great mother goddess in the form of Isis or Demeter, Lakshmi or Parvati or Mary or others, Tara, Kuan Yin, with God or with the divine in a more abstract form such as radiant light. So just a random example. This is such an amazing song. Listen to this after this talk if you don't know it. Eurythmics, There Must Be an Angel, a soaring example of BPM4 feeling. Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, the outset of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in June 85. And she also had some Jupiter, Uranus transits. Or world transits rather, and she was born with, I guess, looks like 1955 or 56 from my memory, Jupiter Uranus square Neptune, and then her co-writer also had Jupiter Uranus and Neptune in a triad. This is a great example of the BPM4 feeling. Love that song. This is from a breathwork session, experience of crucifixion and explosive transcendence of boundaries during the transition from BPM 3 to BPM 4. She had Uranus opposition her natal sun at this time. And then one of Stan's perinatal sessions, he passed through the purifying fire of BPM 3 into the blessed realm of rebirth in BPM 4. And this was during the 60s. The Uranus-Pluto conjunction of the 60s was squaring his natal Venus. So Venus inflects things toward beauty, toward color, vibrant, rich imagery. And so the peacock feathers and the feminine divine. So my colleague Eva Ursini drew this sort of reborn Venus. We can have a feeling of transcendence of old beauty patterns and our issues about lovability. And we connect with divine love, and we feel that we deserve it, and we feel it toward others, and so on. Mars-Uranus transits can have this element of BPM 4 in them in our experience when we have Uranus transiting to natal Mars, especially. Uranus can activate martial feelings, so not only in positive ways, but it activates it. It's important that we unilaterally withdraw our aggressive feelings from the social sphere and aim them at transcendence. We aim them at the seventh chakra, like we're going to get out of the birth canal. We don't care what anyone else is doing. We're going to free ourselves, and we become like this determined commitment to go in that direction. And then we can have images of, I actually had this in a session recently during this Mars-Uranus conjunction, had images of like swords and knives with blood on them being washed off. It was like an archetypal image. And I realized that it was like transcending a pattern of violence, like from our species history. There's been a lot of killing for many, many millennia. And we're now at a point in human history where we have to transcend that pattern. And we could get to a much more peaceful and sustainable civilization if we keep doing our inner work, if it happens fast enough before climate change or nuclear war destroy us. But this sense of the killing is over. That archetype can kind of appear in people's psyches, that Mars has been purified now, and that it's all about reaching back to the divine. That's what Mars really wants to do. And these transits can help us with that. So this is a hybrid drawing. Stan Grof did the baby, and then I had Eva Ursini sort of emphasize the mother here in this drawing. So here's the whole sequence again. You can see the obstetric components, and then the archetypal layering of this. Now, when self-exploration continues, there are even deeper realms of the psyche. Grof coined the term transpersonal, actually, in 1968. He was one of the founders of transpersonal psychology. The most important other two were Anthony Sudich and Abraham Maslow, who was the founder of humanistic psychology. Maslow was dissatisfied with humanistic psychology. He wanted to reintroduce and integrate the spiritual striving of the human psyche, and that humanism kind of by definition doesn't really include that. And so transpersonal psychology is considered the fourth wave in psychology after psychoanalysis, behaviorism, and humanism. So Grof discovered this independently. He was working behind the Iron Curtain, but LSD was legal, and he had access. He oversaw an entire wing of the Psychiatric Research Institute in Prague. And his clients began to have not only perinatal experiences, but these transpersonal experiences that transcend the normal boundaries in space or time, or they transcend time and space as we know it altogether. So some of the most important ones were embryonic memory, sperm and ovum consciousness, ancestral, racial, and collective memories, past life experiences. These would all be going back in time. Then expansions of space, identification with other people or groups of people. I had an experience recently where I felt like I was inside the psyche of Russia. And then it kind of moved toward, I felt like I was inside the psyche of Putin, and then Ivan the Terrible, and complex, right? And it's always intermixed with your own process, but you're feeling the same emotions, and then it opens out into other people, groups of people that have had the same emotions. And fear was a major component in that experience. There was also aggressive energies, obviously, and Putin and I don't know if it's accurate, but it subjectively really feels very convincing when you have them, and Ivan the Terrible and so on. And having those experiences has the subjective feeling that we're helping the situation, that we're helping to consume the roots of the negative behaviors. And again, it's impossible to prove it, but you see how that the universe could set it up in such a way that when people access those experiences, that could help, that could release tension from the collective psyche. You become like a fisher for these buried energies, fear and aggression, greed, and so on, to come forth and be processed out, and that it can possibly reduce it ever so little in the people or the group or the country that you're experiencing. We can't choose those experiences. We can't say, I'm going to go there. It's our inner healer might take us there. It might take us to any number of other places. But when it does happen, it feels very meaningful. We can identify with the consciousness of a specific animal, plant, or inorganic material. Even human-made objects have consciousness. We can identify with all of life or all of creation. And then we can transcend time and space altogether, archetypal and mythological sequences, and the most profound experiences that human beings can have, or the universal mind, absolute consciousness, could be called God or goddess also, or the supercosmic void. And then the transits that we have will inflect which of these kinds of memories come up. What is the emotional, thematic character of those inner emerging experiences? We can see that reflected in our transits. So it can help us to prepare ahead of time. It can help us to integrate and understand our experiences afterwards. And it can help us to support our clients as well. So Rick saw the entire sort of history of, or modern history of Homo sapiens as a kind of a birth labor. Many other people have seen it, and that we're in a birth labor, and the baby's crowning right now before our eyes, but it's a very dangerous moment, and there's no guarantee we're going to make it out alive, but a kind of a patriarchy is the 5,000-year birth canal of the great mother goddess, that the great kingdoms began about 3,000 years ago in Egypt and Sumer, and the beginning of the sort of rational linear thinking with writing and so on. And then our colleague Karen Motan drew this, the Cosmic Mother. So the whole structure could be depicted by something like this. Now, there's so much information. most people, when they see this for the first time, if they know some of the particulars, like the BPMs, they might stare at this for like 20 minutes. There's just so much information here. You can come back and look if you want. But the ordinary ego consciousness is here at the top in this model, and then the personal unconscious, and then the perinatal matrices, and then the transpersonal realms. And when they emerge in our sessions, in our inner lives, they don't just emerge as a random mosaic of unrelated memories, but they tend to emerge as a series of connected memories that are bound together by a similar emotion or sensation. So there could be positive memories that emerge. We could relive successes in our lifetime, or various breakthroughs that we've had, and then it would deepen into the experience of the completed birth, BPM 4, and then even deeper than that, there might be a memory of the end of a war, or like the end of slavery, in the psyche of African Americans, and so on. And then the same thing with negative memories. We could relive near drowning when we were a child, and then let's see. And then it could deepen into the experience of suffocation in the birth canal. And then Grof has actually observed this. People could have a memory of being hanged in a past life. And so our inner healer will deliver up these memories to us to process. And usually it starts with the most recent ones, and then down into the perinatal, and then often our symptoms might have their deepest roots in the transpersonal layers of the psyche. This will all be illuminated by the astrological transits. So astrology is a lot about the perinatal layer, right? I mean, the way most people use astrology, it's based on the birth of something. So it's the end of the birth. So it's the beginning of the separate biological existence. And this is like a whole course to explain and to illuminate and explore more deeply into this. So anyone who's interested, starting a new course in September. So our aspects on our transits will reveal important information about our incarnation and involution into matter. So the way that the universal consciousness sort of funnels down in to an individual being, individual incarnation. We are a piece of the divine, which is having a human experience. And the quality of our birth will tell us a lot about how the universal consciousness gets kind of compressed, constricted, to the point that we forget our divine nature. That as we grow up, the effects of the birth trauma continue, even if it's buried in our psyches, and we essentially forget that we're a piece of divine consciousness that is having a human experience. So that's the involution into matter. But our transits can also illuminate the process of our awakening and our evolution back into the universal consciousness. It's usually described as awakening or realization. As we're dismantling these traumatic structures in our psyches, they unpack themselves in systematic work, then we're opening or widening the pathway back to the divine consciousness here, which is underlying this entire model. So I won't read these, but some of the things that astrology can do for us. It can really help us to choose good days for sessions and events and so on. Most of you know this. It can help us to ground us during the expansive times. It's important that we do this with our clients. If we don't want them to get carried away when they have their Jupiterian or Uranian or Neptunian moments, to remind them that you could be inflated during these transits. So, be careful, and it won't last too. And when they're suffering, when they're under heavy Saturn or Pluto transits, to encourage them that too has a time limit. This is one of the most important features of astrology. So there's my website again. Adelia already posted that, I think, and then Archetypal News Network, and here's our website for that, archetypalnews.net. Now, Delia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I was going to read a couple of excerpts from my upcoming book. I'm republishing O Goddess as the astrology of love and relationships. I've expanded it a bit. I've taken out some of the more juvenile comedy, and the astrology of love and relationships, composite and synastry pathways to happiness. And I wanted to read a little bit, but I'm not sure. I think I have maybe 5 or 10 minutes, so we'll see. So Moon Venus.
Yeah, I think our audience will really enjoy hearing that.
I'm just not sure when my hour and a half began, if it was at 10 after or right at on the hour. But I just put a few slides together for each of those sections, so we can just look at those. So Moon and Venus. So these are excerpts from my 3,000 slideshow that I put together, which explore in a pretty in-depth and far-reaching way all the planetary pairs. And I send that to all my students. So if you're interested, that's a pretty interesting slideshow. You can also get that without being in the course. So Happiness is a Warm Puppy. It's just a classic Moon Venus, isn't it? And Charles M. Schultz, Moon Square Venus. And then Marlowe's Come Live With Me and Be My Louvre, and We Will All the Pleasures Prove. That's how my English professor pronounced it, so that's how I'm going to do it. That valleys, groves, hills, and fields, woods, or steepy mountain yields. Moon Uranus square Venus, the passionate shepherd to his love, or Louvre. And then Oscar Wilde, I can resist everything except temptation. Moon Venus, Neptune at the Moon Venus midpoint. And then Rita Mae Brown, lead me not into temptation. I can find the way myself. And then just a random example from movie stars Debbie Reynolds, the great star of Singing in the Rain, one of the most highly regarded movies of all time, and probably the most highly regarded musical. So a cute ingenue persona. This was kind of the favored archetype of female stars, like in the 50s and 60s, not in the film noir, but in the sort of most popular Hollywood movies, sort of youthful girl next door energy. It's kind of a Sun Uranus image, the reborn sun. I had a friend draw, and then Sun Neptune image, the Neptune in the divine womb. And then a Sun Neptune cartoon. I'm a transplendently awakened being of divine light. That is so impressive, Doug. Now, would you mind touching me? Esoteric nature of Sun Neptune. And Mercury Neptune, this sort of sense of mental serenity and peace, and also connection with the divine or with the world around us, this perception of meaning, mystical thoughts. Here's a cartoon. this is the more fun part of my presentation. I'll go for another 10 minutes. So we have come from afar in the east, following portents in the heavens to honor the birth of the blessed Savior child, Horus the Messiah. Horus, what? Well, this is awkward. Are you guys by any chance Mesopotamian Hellenistic hybrid astrologers? Yes, we are. Did you factor in the new moon and Ishtar in the second decant of Anu? And then comes, I believe the savior you're looking for is in the next major over. Early fine-tuning in Mesopotamian Hellenistic locational astrology. I came up with this cartoon when I was sitting in the pub one day, and I had this artist draw this, and with many thanks to Bernadette Brady and Chris Brennan for their research. Now, a great example of, so these are just some random examples now of planetary archetypes. I thought you'd be interested in. This is like samples from my huge slideshow. So Anne Hathaway, a great example of Venus, Jupiter, and also the Venus, Uranus. But this great movie, what's it called? Name slipped me. It's
The Devil Wears Prada.
Fashion world. But the sort of the shallow side of Venus, Jupiter, you know, the clothing and the prestige and the kind of snobby mannerisms, but also the higher form of Venus, Jupiter, of finding true friendship, finding meaningful higher connection with people, and not just this sort of movie star side of it. So she's a great example of that. I'll think of that movie in a sec. Now, Venus, Jupiter, Liberace, classic Venus, Jupiter, Pluto triple conjunction. Here you can see the ornate, embellished Jupiter, aesthetic Venus, but then supercharged by Pluto, like really going for it, this Venus, Jupiter, Pluto. And then Beyonce, also born with Venus, Jupiter, Pluto. And she certainly had a lot of both primal energy, Pluto, beauty, Venus, also good values, and a kind of a very lush, expansive, full-bodied aesthetic with Jupiter as well. And we've seen this Venus-Uranus image. So, okay, so I want to just read a little bit from my Venus-Jupiter. In this rich and fruity blending, Jupiter grandly expands the social and artistic yearnings of pleasure-seeking Venus. You are a flamboyant medley of good times, a cornucopia of fun and enjoyment, sparing nothing to make a sumptuous celebration of your life as you heap on yourself and your friends the full sensory banquet from soup to nuts and whipped cream. You want that grandly satisfied feeling. Your ripe and luscious beauty projects masterfully into the world as your sophisticated nature impels you to dress up and go out on the town, flashing your assets around with all the style and elegance of a Hollywood movie star. Whatever instrument you prefer, you get in touch with your inner Liberace, strutting and preening in full display before heading back to the apartment. It's such a shame to take it off too fast. You may also get spruced up and make love with your clothes on. Try the opera bathroom. No one but the tenors will suspect. At best, you enjoy a higher philosophical rapport with your partner, which can bring religious overtones to your sexual life, wherever two or more are gathered in my name. You adore ambiances of genteel comfort and beauty, radiating a warm and gracious charm. You can smooth over social problems. To come back to her. You can smooth over social problems before they even arise. Yet despite these genial virtues, some rougher hombres may find your sweet style as somewhat cloying or saccharine. They may even see you as being phony or shallow on occasion, but it is just that you abhor unpleasantness and conflict. Your movie star charm and style are turned on full most of the time. These archetypes also have an indulgent prima donna side, and you may have a habit of overdoing any number of things, socially, financially, or in calories. However, if you remember some basic self-restraint, Venus-Jupiter can be a beautifully positive influence, helping you to relax, unwind, and have some well-deserved fun at the end of the workday. Cook up a rich, delicious meal or go out somewhere comfortable and enjoyable with friends. Have as much fun as possible without maxing out your credit cards. And while your lover almost certainly appreciates your effusive, fruity charm, they also need to know that you can get down off the Shea Lounge and face any deeper emotions and issues that may arise together. After the necessary stirring the relationship oatmeal time, you can carry on with your croissants and jam. Be simply marvelous and fabulous as you display your ornately pleasant persona, but remember to do your share of the work as well. That's just a sample, a small sample of the Venus-Jupiter chapter in my book. I talked about composite and synastry as well. Let's do one more of these. This is the Venus-Pluto. The great quote from May Sarton about Venus-Pluto, and then a quote from Jung, Mars at the Venus-Pluto midpoint. And a quote from William Butler Yeats. Love has pitched his mansion in the place of excrement, for nothing can be soul or whole that has not been rent. This connection between love and the scatological and the sort of Pluto's destruction. Venus Pluto, very interesting. Crazy Jane talks with the bishop. And then how to catch a man, keep a man, get rid of a man. Zsa Zsa Gabor, Venus opposition Saturn, Pluto, title of book. It's a sort of real classic. And then a beautiful Venus-Pluto image character was, I don't have his chart here in this particular slide. I pulled this one out of a sequence, but this is Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror. Sort of flaming, petulant queen, oozing angry sexual energy, both vulnerable and ruthless. A man of little morals. Tim Curry, acting out virtually every aspect of the BPM-3 sequence. It's a really fun movie, Rocky Horror. I'm sure most of you have seen that. Okay, I think I'm just down to a couple minutes here. And then another great example of Venus-Pluto was Amy Schumer. Really like her comedy a lot, likably raunchy and explicit. The Venus kind of adds the cuteness and the kind of innocence. She looks kind of like all American kind of, and then she's just, the things she talks about are much more Plutonic. It's a great juxtaposition. So Mars, Jupiter, we're just going to get up to the Venus, Uranus, and I can read a little bit of that one, but I had these slides prepared. So Mars, Jupiter, Amelia Earhart, this kind of courage, and then Kennedy's sort of initiatory energy of let's get started on this new world, this more peaceful and more sort of less racist world that he was talking about. And the negative side of Mars, Jupiter, patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel, Samuel Johnson. So I had a lot of fun putting this massive slideshow together. These are just some very small. And Mars, Saturn, small sample. Churchill, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. If a leader said that to anyone today, that'd be like off with his head, you know. It's like, what's in it for me, you know? And then look twice before you leap. Charlotte Bronte, that very careful. I do not participate in any sport with ambulances at the bottom of a hill. Irma Bombeck, Mars, Saturn. You can see, like, she doesn't ski. And then my life is one demmed horde grind, Charles Dickens, Mars square Saturn. If you hate a person, you hate something in him that is part of yourself. What isn't part of ourselves doesn't disturb us. Hermann Hesse with a Mars conjunct Saturn. Wise words. So this is happening in the sky right now, so it's something to think about. We need to get in touch with our own aggression and process that out in our sessions, and our own fear. Fear and aggression, that's the Mars-Saturn combination, among other things. There's many positive sides too. Okay, let's skip the Mars-Uranus. Jack Kerouac, great quote there. Tallulah Bankhead, Mars-Uranus. The only thing I regret about my past life is the length of it. If I had my past life over again, I'd make all the same mistakes, only sooner. She was a classic wild woman of the 20s, the silent era. And then Drew Carey, I'm not a good lover, but at least I'm fast. Mars Uranus is connected with speed. So that's, and then the great Madonna. And I feel like I just got home quicker than a ray of light. This is one of the most exciting videos ever made from the 90s, that Uranus-Neptune conjunction as well. But she's got natal Mars square Uranus. The speed in that sense of movement is very exciting. And then Jim Morrison, break on through to the other side, Sun opposition Mars-Uranus. Okay, I'm just going to go through these a little bit faster till we get to, there's Caroline Casey, Jupiter-Uranus, till we get to the, well, I might not have a Venus-Uranus slide. Let's see here. Just the overconfidence of Jupiter-Uranus. Kaiser Wilhelm II, the Kaiser of Germany in World War I, he said this to his troops at the outbreak of World War I. You will be home before the leaves hit the ground. And then you think about Putin with Uranus conjunct his natal Jupiter right now by transit. Same archetype. It's amazing, how the process of wholeness moves the roles around. The rebel becomes the tyrant, and so on. So we experience all the parts. And then the great idealism, the grand dream of Martin Luther King is, I have a dream speech, Jupiter, Neptune. Okay, let me just read this Venus-Uranus. We want to save some time for questions, but fun-loving Venus in the cosmic convertible with exciting rebel Uranus give you the style and sparkle of a flashing prism in the sunshine and some really wild hair. With the bubbly effervescence of organic champagne, you are the vivacious life of the party, the spark and catalyst reminding others of the fun possibilities in every situation. You have a magically awakening effect on the world around you. You may also embody the kind of striking appeal that turns people's heads when you walk into a room. Highlighted in flashy apparel as you disport and strut down the boulevard of life, you might be a problem for certain distracted drivers. You will enjoy many flashes of aesthetic rapture and epiphany over the course of your life. Immersed in a higher harmony, you perceive the electric beauty in nature, art, and music, like being plugged into a divine current. Your aesthetic gifts can range from a love of bright, vivid colors and eccentric clothing to original creative expression. Think of Lady Gaga, born with the square, I believe, and Cher, Venus-Uranus, two classic Venus-Uranus people. You also have the potential to enjoy many exciting sexual breakthroughs over the course of your lifetime. When Venus-Uranus is engaged by transit, you may be graced with unexpected renewals of affection in a current relationship. Suddenly, something shifts and you feel fresh and alive together, enjoying magically renewed feelings of romance, friendship, and fun. At times, you can experience lovemaking as an exhilarating, giddy rush of cosmic energies as you break through the inertia of your everyday holding patterns and connect with love reborn. Rosy-cheeked with divine pleasure and abandon, you are quite simply the sugar and spice in the world's sensory buffet, a heavenly dish which even the gods and goddesses envy from on high. These archetypes may also bring occasional curveballs into your love life, as you or your mate become attracted, often briefly, to a third person outside of the relationship. Venus-Uranus can manifest as the classic romantic triangle. Excuse me. Well, Sally, I'm now in a triangle situation. How about you? Triangle. I remember the calm and stable days of my amorous triangles as if they were a month of Mondays in a snowed-in mountain convent. Wow. So what are you into now? Quadrangles? No, pentangles. In general, your yearning for stimulation and excitement may take precedence over your needs for security and stability as you rush into shiny new situations which offer little or no lasting substance. I want to read a little more, but I think I will. If you are single, you may meet someone new during these transits. You might have sudden feelings for another, or someone could be suddenly attracted to you. You may also indulge in a series of short but sweet amorous trysts, like sampling your way through the culinary treasures of an hors d'oeuvre table. Skimming over the emotional surface in these romantic escapades, though, you might never stay long enough to experience more than the passing, exciting rush of novelty. In order to enjoy deeper and more meaningful feelings, you may need to explore the emotional wounds in your psyche. Relationships could threaten your sense of freedom and space, reminding you of the confining pressures and suffocation of the birth canal. You want me to put my finger in that gulp ring? When these perinatal leftovers have been consumed from your unconscious in holotropic states, you may feel more able to accept the commitment of a relationship without feeling that the life will be squeezed out of you. I'm just got a couple more slides here and then I'm done. There are many paths up the mountain. Jupiter, Neptune, Ramakrishna, classic. I've abandoned my search for truth and I'm now looking for a good fantasy. Ashley, brilliant. Jupiter at the Mercury, Neptune midpoint. And then Kate McKinnon, the great Kate McKinnon, probably the most talented person that's ever been on Saturday Night Live, in my opinion. Capacity to totally submerge herself into characters. That's Jupiter, Neptune. And then Mercury, Neptune gives the skill with accents. Jim Carrey, also Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune, also Dana Carvey. My colleague Alexis Angelucci just pointed that out about Carvey, three of the greats. And then a Neptune-Pluto quote from Jung. You can come back to that if you want to. And my final slide. One day, humans will dematerialize into the astral plane and reappear in the 8th dimension of celestial light, and there will be no struggle, no suffering, and no tyranny. That may be, Johnson, but you're still fired. The application of Promethean idealism, the meeting of Saturn and Uranus. Eva Ursini drew that one. There. So don't know how much longer we have, till 10 after or something like that, but I hope you found that interesting and I'd love to take some questions. Thanks for letting me share that. It's my funnest topic.
Yeah, everyone really enjoyed
your mic's
seeing
turned
those
off.
slides.
Oh, maybe my speaker's turned down.
I think.
Now I can hear you. Sorry.
Okay, there we go. That makes sense because earlier I said the Devil Wears Prada for the movie thing, and
okay,
I don't
so
think
they
you
heard it.
me.
They heard it. Good. I turned my speaker off so there would be no feedback.
Ah, that's good. Okay.
Devil Wears Prada, classic Venus Jupiter movie.
Absolutely. No, I was just saying that everyone enjoyed hearing and seeing those slides at the end. So I think it was a good addition.
Good. No
Oh,
trouble.
speaking, so did you say that you were going to share or distribute your 3,000 slide presentation?
I sell it. It's
Oh,
available
you
on my
sell it.
website. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I recorded it. I recorded it as a, presentation. So it's like 30 weeks of presentations, 2-hour presentations. So yeah.
Okay. There were a couple of questions about where students can get that, or audience members on his website.
Yeah. rennbutler.com. Yeah. And it's included in my class tuition as well. So.
Okay. So a question, can you please elaborate on two questions? First, what kind of trauma features can we see in PBM4? Second, can someone experience two stages of perinatal experience at the same time, like PMB3 and 4 together?
Wow, great questions. Yeah, BPM4, while it's mostly a positive experience, when people are in touch with BPM4, but still have underlying BPM3 material, then that can result in manic tendencies, like bipolar disorder. Grof was able to completely heal 100% people with manic depression. And that in the manic phase, they're in touch with BPM4, but it's exaggerated by the underlying volcanic aggressive energy. So they get carried away with this freedom thing and trying to defy limits and gravity and speed limits and so on. In order to reach the more integrated BPM4, they have to be willing to surrender to the remaining BPM3 material and process it until they reach a more calm and peaceful BPM4. The BPM, when the flashlight of consciousness shines on BPM3, that would be the depressive phase. And then the flashlight shines back on BPM4, memories in the psyche, then they go into the manic phase. You can't control that flashlight, but that's a very plausible clinical observation that Grof had. And so in a lesser form, manic tendencies. So you don't want to, make phone calls to try to call the president or the pope at the end of a psychedelic session, like to say, you've got to try this. Everyone needs to do this right away. So keep the cell phone stowed safely in the hands of someone sober on the day that you're doing that. And yes, you can, as I just gave one example, be influenced by more than one perinatal matrix. They tend to alternate, you're in one or the other, but they alternate. And that's a very good question. So Saturn Neptune would be BPM 1 and 2, or Uranus Neptune BPM 1 and 4, and so on. And it's a very helpful way to understand transits a bit more deeply. Yeah, great question.
A similar question or related question. Can you please elaborate how we can identify the stage of BPM that we are born into? Shall we look at the real life experience and make assumptions relative to the stage of BPM? As an example, is sexual abuse an indication of BPM stage 3, or shall we look at the planetary position in the natal chart?
Wow. Wait, you got some good, smart students here. Wow. Yeah, good question. Well, everyone, unless you're an elective cesarean, you go through all 4 of those stages, right? But they will have more influence on you in positive and negative ways based on events in your childhood. So if your childhood is happy, good mothering and fathering and no physical and sexual abuse and so on, that encapsulates the negative memories of birth in a buffer of positive memories, and you can sort of forget about it, and the universe is basically friendly. You're now reconnected with the good womb, maybe the breastfeeding and bonding with the mother after birth, those good parts of birth. So you're a happy person. Not sure if that's adequate answer for that one. Could you please remind me of what she? I'm not a morning
Yes.
person, sorry.
I'm not normally either. Okay, yeah. How can we identify the stage that we're born into? Do you look at the real life experience and make assumptions relative to the stages?
Okay, I
or
remember.
do you look at the planetary position?
Yeah. Okay, so sexual abuse, Grof found that when people are healing the terrible wounds of sexual abuse or rape, they not only have to work through the emotions and sensations from the event. This tends to connect in the psyche. Yes, that person was correct with BPM3. There's a kind of enforced sexual arousal that happens in BPM3, like we're being suffocated. There's sexual feelings mixed in with aggression and fear. And he found that in order to completely resolve sexual abuse, people had to not then also clear out the perinatal leftovers in order to fully resolve it. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah. So it's a pretty big project, but it's not impossible. And these options are becoming more and more available now. So try to find a therapist in your area that is working with psychedelics. Another option is a spiritual friend, someone you trust that you could trade with, and start with small amounts and gradually work up to larger amounts if you feel comfortable. It's not a partner, not someone you're sexually involved with. You could also pay a friend, someone that you trust. And then ideally, you would have two sitters, a male and female. Sooner or later, you want to have that, as if you do higher dosages, then you can work with mother and father issues, male and female issues.
Yeah. This next question, you already touched upon it a little bit, but I want to relay it in case you have anything additional to add. So the question is, can you say something about how clients who were born by C-section experience these BPM phases in therapy sessions? Curious whether they skip the phase that relates to active labor.
Yeah, wow, really, really great questions. So in a vaginal delivery, we lose the womb, we go into a kind of a torture chamber in a sense, and then volcanic dynamic stage of labor, and then with a lot of suffering, and then an explosive liberation and freedom. And this creates a deep ingrained sense of optimism in the psyche. Grof feels that this was necessary for us, for our ancestors, in order to create the toughness and tenacity and optimism to survive the difficult conditions that our Stone Age ancestors lived in. In an emergency cesarean, the pattern would be basically the same. You might go right from BPM2 to being sort of cut out, or BPM3, but more or less the same pattern. But in an elective cesarean, you go right from the womb, which let's say it's a very blissful, positive womb situation, into the delivery room. And the delivery room is much less positive than the womb in many ways. There's hot and cold, light and dark. There's hunger and thirst, wet and dry, the world of dualities. And so there can be kind of people, elective cesareans, on the other hand, don't have all that perinatal trauma. So Grof suggests that people have easier access to spiritual states. There's less blocking them from accessing the transpersonal realms. On the difficult side, they may have a tendency to relate to the world as if it's a womb, and be very open. And when it doesn't respond in kind, sooner or later someone will be mean, like life. Then they'll retreat into their shell and really introvert. They won't have the tenacity and toughness to persevere and to keep going. So that's a factor. I believe that our prime minister in Canada, Trudeau, was an elective cesarean. And in the first couple of years, he had that openness. He was like a rock star. He was like photo bombing pictures all over the place and shaking everyone's hands like a, yeah. And then he started getting criticism from the, the loyal opposition parties. And now he's much more contained. So I would, interesting. Great question.
Next question. Excluding medical traumas, does there seem to be any correlations regarding premature or induced births?
Well, I think the main factor is, people realize when they work through those kind of stages in their birth, they would be grateful that they were saved. They realized that maybe without medical science they would have died. So that's a factor. But one of the most immediate issues is that babies were often born premature and then put in incubators, and they were put there so that the nurses could attend to them, like an ICU, basically, like to monitor them so they would survive. But there was a tremendous amount of emotional starvation and lack of bonding. Now, I think that's improved a lot. There's probably a lot more holding and rocking, but probably not enough. And there can be a sense of, being a newborn heart, but no one there to love you. And that creates a deep vacuum in the psyche. And Grof found that the only way that can be healed is by receiving the supportive physical contact from therapists or sitters while you're in a deeply regressed state. You have to go back to that place and then receive what you missed. No amount of love or anything else, possessions, of course, and all that, will fill that void. You have to go back to that original state and then receive it. And that can be 100% healed. So.
The next question is, how would a breech birth fit into the BPM schema, and how might we see it in a chart? So in case anyone's not familiar, breech birth, I believe, is when the baby comes out bottom first instead of head first, right? It's turned around.
Yeah. Well, there could be a lot more physical trauma, like bones can break, I think. Hips can be sort of wrenched out of alignment and things like that. The birth could be longer. So there could still be suffocation happening while you're in that longer birth. So more trauma happening. This can all be processed out. People can relive every detail of their obstetric sequence. As far as a specific astrological indicator, I don't think you can find something that goes, this equals breech birth, but it's certainly a Saturnian component of sort of extra trauma, of delay, of being squeezed and scrunched. And you'll see that would be connected in the chart with their Saturn, natal Saturn, and transit to their natal Saturn is when those memories are likely to surface, in deep work.
Another question, is there an alternative to psychedelics for those who cannot or do not want to use them?
Yes. Grof, with Christina Grof, developed a non-drug technique, which they called holotropic breathwork, deep and rapid breathing with evocative music. It's the same music that we would use in psychedelic-assisted therapy sessions. Focused body work, if people are unresolved at the end, and then mandala drawing in a supportive group environment. I highly recommend that. Grof has also launched with his new partner, Brigitte Grof, as Christina passed away, a new training program. I highly recommend it. there's an international website, Grof Legacy Training. Check that out. He's still alive. He's 90 years old. And they're gung-ho on this new training program, and they've got some really good people working with them. They're in many countries of the world. There are semi-independent, mostly independent training groups that are running events, and some dovetail with psychedelic training depending on the legal situation in the country, but there's always a strong breathwork component. So check out the Grof Legacy Training. In the US, it's Grof Legacy Project USA, and I'm helping with some of the online teaching. So they've got a really good group of folks. And there'll be more workshops available. So just Google Grof Breathwork. That's what they're calling it now, Grof Breathwork. And there are also people doing holotropic breathwork, which is the original training.
And unfortunately, we have more questions than we have time to answer, but I want to thank everyone for your wonderful participation and engagement. I have saved one question that I thought would be nice to end the Q&A with, which is, when is your next book coming out?
Oh, thanks. Thanks. And well, really great questions. I wish I could see all your faces out there, everybody. Thanks for your very intelligent questions. I'm in the final stage of polishing, and I'm going to get some colleagues to read sections in return for a free book. If you're interested and you have experience editing, just drop me an email, like maybe 50 pages in return for a free book. And it should be out in about 30 days or maybe 6 weeks. I've added a section of classic relationships, 12 interesting relationships that I'm looking at in terms of composite and synastry, like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, John Lennon and Paul McCartney is one, Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown, Bonnie and Clyde, Elton John and Bernie Taupin, and 7 more. Glenn Fry and Don Henley of the Eagles. So really fun to write this. So that I've been adding that in. So there's a great Facebook group called Archetypal Astrology and Transpersonal Psychology, if you want to join that one. And I will be putting notices on that when the book comes out. And I'll also be recording some little fun promo videos with some more excerpts from the book on ANN when the book comes out. So hit the notification bell, and you'll know when that comes out. Thank you for that.
Right, and let me direct people once again to where they can find the link to your website and more of your work. So once again, if you go to nightlightastrology.com, events, speaker series, you can see the site on the page, right, Renn? I'm screen sharing.
I'm just looking. Okay. Thank you, Kelsey, for your comment. Yes, I can see that. Yes, it's there.
Okay.
You got it there, and it's rennbutler.com.
Oh, yes. So if you go down here, then you can find the link to his website, to archetypalnews.net. And then from here, you can find just all of Renn's work, content, courses. You have an upcoming course, right, as well?
Yeah, starting in September. Yes, it includes a full-length reading and my slideshow. And I'm actually putting together a booklet, a manual, a study guide, where people can kind of keep up and do their homework and write in things. And
so, some people are homework nerds like me who enjoy doing homework.
Yeah. I was little. I've been quite structured. This year was less structured, and some people loved it, and other people didn't like the lack of structure. So I'm going for a balance. Yeah. So, well, I like nerds. Nerds are great.
We're in good company then. And once again, the replay of this talk will be available to the general public right on this page, beginning on Monday, and it will be available for 7 days. And if you are a currently enrolled and active student in one of Acyuta's programs, you will also receive the recording. All right. And so thank you so much for this, Renn. I found it very interesting. I learned a lot of new things. It's introduced me to a whole new area of exploration, and I really enjoyed the artwork as well. That was, yeah.
Oh, Delia, you've done a wonderful job. Thank you for your warm welcome, and I really enjoyed this. Thanks for the opportunity, everybody. Will I be able to read the questions and chat things later?
I have saved them, and
Okay.
I will pass them on to you with the recording.
Okay. I hope everybody found that interesting, and happy transits.
Right. So if you want to share some love for Renn, you can type it into the chat box, and I will make sure he gets it later.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.